I've also got a U.S. Senator who sits on the Foreign Relations and Armed Services Committee here with me, Democrat of Virginia, Senator Tim Kaine. And thank you, Senator, for being here. I do think on the premise of what we've heard of why there is such a huge military buildup, U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean, one question some people might have tonight is how seizing an oil tanker helps stop the flow of drugs into the U.S. What would you say to that?
Well, Kaitlan, I think it just raises even more questions about what is this mission about. I'll say this, the strikes on the boats in international waters, the evidence is flimsy about whether each of these strikes is going against a boat that's actually carrying drugs. I can't say more than that because what I know from classified settings, since the Senate has been unwilling to hold a single public hearing in either the Armed Services Committee or the Foreign Relations Committee about this military operation. But the whole notion that these strikes are to stop boats with drugs on them is flimsy in my view. And now here we have the seizure of an oil tanker. Is it about drugs? Is it about the seizing of oil? The president says the U.S. will keep the oil. Is it about regime change? Why exactly have we deployed so many of our troops, including Virginians, into a mission where we're using military action to kill people, to slaughter survivors of shipwrecks on the open sea in violation of U.S. and international law, and to do so in a way that even key Pentagon leaders, the head of Southcom, the legal advisor of Southcom, key allies like the UK are raising serious questions about the legality of this entire mission. It's time for Congress to take this out of the classified facility and have public hearings about it so the American public can see what's really at stake.
Yeah, I think people would like to hear what y'all are hearing behind closed doors. But on this tanker, just for a moment, it was sanctioned by President Biden, by his administration. Do you believe that the Trump administration has the legal authority to do what they did today?
They haven't presented that authority to Congress, and I'd want to dig into it. If it was just a matter, if what the Trump administration was doing was only this, that would be one thing. But to do this together with boat strikes that are killing folks, to say, as the president has, that he's authorized covert operations in Venezuela, that he may well soon start a land invasion in Venezuela, and to amass military troops surrounding Venezuela, you've got to look at this in the context of all of these recent actions, which raise huge questions for my constituents, many of which I'm not allowed to answer because the only thing that the administration has told me about this has been in classified settings. I don't think they want this out to the public. They're walking back, for example, on their promise of President Trump to release the video of the fatal strike on shipwrecked survivors, which they said they would do, and now they're walking that back. Let's bring the American public into this and have a debate, transparent debate about why are we doing this, what's at stake, what's the legal rationale.
What I've heard from lawmakers coming out of those meetings with top Trump officials about releasing that video, that second part of the video, is that there's kind of a dispute over revealing sources and methods, making sure you're protecting that, kind of meeting both ends of that. But I think one question people might have is how can you release part of the video showing, the initial strike, but you can't show the second part? Does that make sense?
Kaitlan, you've put your finger on it. The secretary, I heard him speak in California last week at a defense forum, and he said, well, we couldn't release that second video because we would reveal intelligence gathering sources and methods. Wait a minute, you released to the world in like promotional videos on the president's Truth Social page and almost in commercials, your braggadocious video about the actual strike that destroyed the boat on September 2nd. You've revealed the sources and methods. It was the same video stream that picked up the later attack on the survivors, but you're now going to claim that you can't release that? If you'd kept it all secret, that would have been one thing. But you went out and bragged to the world about sinking this boat, and now you're suddenly afraid for the world to see what really happened. That tells me there's a little bit of a guilty conscience going on. There's a reason they don't want folks to see this, because I think if people did see it, even more legal questions and strategic questions would bubble to the surface.
The president said something today about the president of Colombia that stood out to me. I want you to just listen to that comment.
Colombia is producing a lot of drugs. They have cocaine factories that they make cocaine, as you know, and they sell it right into the United States. So he better wise up, or he'll be next. He'll be next, too. And I hope he's listening. He's going to be next.
Next, what?
Well, look, the president has indicated that these attacks that may be forthcoming on Venezuela could also extend to other countries. I don't know if he's thinking about China, since that's where more of the fentanyl comes from. That's the real source of the fentanyl problem. I don't know if he's thinking about Mexico, because that's where so much of the fentanyl comes from. But the issue that Kaitlan and I've been raising is, Constitution is clear. We shouldn't be at war without a vote of Congress. Those who think this war is justified, great. Let them introduce an authorization for military force and vote on it in Congress after a debate that the American public can see, to make their own decisions about whether war is necessary in this circumstance. But we don't have a government where we've allowed presidents to unilaterally decide to be judge, jury, and executioner, to decide who to wage war against. And I always point out, the framers of the Constitution put the power to make decisions about war in the hands of Congress, even though George Washington was president. They loved George Washington. They revered George Washington. But they didn't even think that a president as distinguished in military service as George Washington should have the sole power to declare whether to take the United States to war.
Senator Tim Kaine, thank you for joining us tonight.
So glad to do it.
And earlier, President